with the evolution of technology, with the evolution of IT, with the evolution of AI in itself, but also biotechnology altogether, I think the challenge for the human race to not end as a useless species is something that we will all have to embrace. I believe the customer care or the customer experience industry in which I'm in, I think is probably, when it comes to humans, probably the last that will be completely in AI hand, because the amount of empathy, the amount of human interaction, the amount of interaction quality is really, really hard to do by AI. I'm more scared about other industries where the people will be made redundant in droves just because AI can do it much more efficient and can be updated at any time. Of course, elder employees will have more difficulties than younger, probably. But of course, there's also the other side of the business where a human might never take place in the first, where we would engage in processes that will not see any human being whatsoever. But they will all mingle together in one service scope for a certain customer, for a certain customer experience altogether. Yeah.
Do you want to go back to normal after Corona? Do you really want to go back to normal? I don't. Welcome to Not Back to Normal. I am Markus Strön, and I want COVID-19 to change the business world for the better. In each episode, I talk to entrepreneurs, business leaders, and change makers about how they have adapted in this crisis and how they further intend to change the way they live, work, and run their businesses for the better to make capitalism much more conscious and working for all. In this episode, I'm speaking with André Stark. André is the CEO of Capita Germany, a market-leading outsourcing business for customer service with 7,000 employees. Prior to that, André led the business line Connected Life at Digital Products and Services at BMW, and he was also the managing director of Autoscout24, which is the largest pan-European online car sales platform. André and I go back almost 20 years, and what I always admired in André is his high emotional intelligence, empathy, and care for the people he leads. That's where he just stood out from the top dog crowd I was surrounded by at T-Motion PLC at the beginning of my career in London. And that's why I also wanted to get him on the podcast, because I had a strong sense that he would lead his organization into lockdown and through the COVID-19 crisis in a way that people will remember as making the impossible possible through teamwork and good leadership. I really rate his mindfulness and humbleness as a human being and business leader. And now I bring you André Stark. André, thanks for coming on the podcast.
You're more than welcome. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Markus.
So how are you?
Altogether, I feel good. I have personally not suffered neither from a health point of view nor mentally, I hope, from the crisis. So altogether, I'm really good. And this week has been quite okay, actually quite promising, because I made some good progress in one of my digital things going on. So I'm quite happy.
Great. And how do you describe what you do for a living? What's your role?
To make a long story short, I'm responsible for Capita Germany. Capita is one of Europe's and Germany's certainly largest outsourcers for customer care topics. We are a market leader in this space and deal with major clients in telecommunications, energy, and other industries. My role is to run the German business, but I'm also co-responsible for our European engagement, which is basically Germany and Switzerland, and we report back into Capita PLC in the UK.
Right. And you mentioned earlier that this week you've made some progress on one of your digital endeavors. Do you want to share that? What you're currently working on?
I'm building on top of the existing rather transactional business that customer care is normally. I'm building a digital platform, a consulting and customer journey management platform that gives us full flexibility in terms of creating more digital customer experiences. And that is sort of like a managed portfolio of services layered around consulting capabilities and on top of basically a huge environment of different skill sets of people in the digital space. And that is thriving back. I have to say that has been pretty difficulty in the crisis time because a lot of the projects that we were about to close were dropping dead or being delayed due to crisis. But now it's picking up and we have used the time properly and have made progress on some of our homework and also have gotten further with potential new customers. So that was quite good to see.
Cool. And let's talk about the lockdown and the COVID-19 crisis. So you are leading an organization with several thousand people. And when the word customer call center comes up, I have an image of lots of people being in some sort of office together. And then within a matter of weeks, you had to do something quite drastic. You had to get into crisis management mode and assumably take quite a few of your employees into remote working. So just take us back into these weeks of March and April. How did you do that? How did you take your organization into the lockdown crisis management? What did you do? Also, what positive surprises came about them?
In the very beginning, I was quite reluctant to accept that there was a crisis coming up. We had a very big event happening in Berlin at the beginning of March, our main event with lots of customers and a big show act and stuff like that in a great location. And just a week before that, we got the first turndowns from customers where they said they wouldn't travel anymore. And hence we, for the first time, accepted something was happening that we did not expect to happen in Germany, to be honest. But from that point on, I think everything has changed. And very quickly, I think I understood that crisis now would become my new normal, if you want to call it like this. And from, let's say, a bi-weekly crisis call, we ended up in a daily crisis call. And my biggest concern actually at the time was that I would have entire sites closed due to quarantine or any other reason. And if I couldn't have people in the home office, then I would not be able to produce any revenue or pay people, which was, of course, the biggest concern that I had. And to be completely honest with you, the call center business, at least most of the call centers in Germany and Europe, actually have difficulties with the home office solution in the agent space for a very simple reason. Our customers actually do not give us the allowance to do so because of data protection, data security reasons, and they demand call centers. So people are put into the call centers for customer reason. And hence, we were never equipped, neither from a hardware nor from any other point, for home office, at least outside the back office part, not. So the vulnerable people topic came up. I think we did nothing else for weeks but putting people and hardware into the home office. I mean, we did nothing else but have crisis call after crisis call in order to get things sorted. That was quite amazing. And I would have not expected that at any point in time.
And what was the scale of that operation? How many hundreds of thousands of people are we talking about that had to be fully equipped from a hardware perspective, probably from all sorts of IT security perspectives in order to be compliant to the data protection rules and basically what your clients expect you to do?
We're talking about 7,000 people in Germany and Switzerland. Actually, we put in Switzerland about 80% into home office, and in Germany, 70% of those people. So I think this was unbelievable. We would have never dreamed to be able to do that. We always thought about home office as a solution, let's say a working model that we would like to go, but there was no way in sight for us to do so. And the crisis was the catalyst for it to happen. But the most important thing was to get agreement from the customers to do so. I think that was really, really the most important thing at the time.
And how did it go down with your employees?
I think one of the most important things for the employees at the time was that they were aware that myself and the other management team were in daily crisis mode and we were taking decisions on their behalf. And our prime mantra was safety for people first. And everything else has to be second, even the business itself. And I think we kept to that mantra all along the entire time. And I think that people felt protected by that. We sent every vulnerable person who said they were vulnerable back into home office immediately. If home office was not possible for whatever reason, we had about like almost 700 vulnerable people at the time not in work. And lots of those were not even productive because they couldn't have internet access from home. We're talking about people in the minimum wage area as well. So we're talking here about a very difficult situation, but people were very happy and felt protected. And I think they also responded, that is maybe a wrong way to say it, but they responded with much less sickness rate and also with a reduced resignation rate, to be honest.
Wow. So that sounds really interesting, that the second a crisis induces a crisis management mode where you say, okay, employees first. This is really, really about people's health, and not just their health from COVID-19, but perhaps also mental health. And then as a return, very, very quickly, you get an increased employee engagement back. What does it do to the assumptions about people, about corporate culture, about the deal that, let's say, top management has with their employees? What were your big learnings in those days? Were there any moments of truth where you thought, like, bloody hell, Andre, that's something I've never experienced in my life before in my career?
I wouldn't say I've never experienced in my career so far, but the density of experiences and surprises in the crisis mode, I think they made the difference for me. People were unified behind the common goal of keeping the lights on by bringing people into home office and keeping them productive. You must imagine 7,000 people sit in call centers across Germany and Switzerland. They are using not laptops, but they're using desktop environment. As we were not prepared for that, we needed to find a way of not only getting our hands quickly on more laptops, for example, but also using the existing equipment from the call centers and bringing them back to people's homes. I mean, we're like a big logistics company, and IT people driving around the areas where people lived and delivered those stuff, or people picked them up at the office and took it back home and install, and then got installation help and so on and so forth. But everybody was aligned behind one target: keep the lights on, keep the business running, and enable a home office as our core resource to be alive. That was just something that I have not felt like that before in that density. And that, of course, was also not only in the IT space, but everybody wanted to make it happen. So people gave their best. They helped wherever they could. They did overtime in order to just make it happen. And I think that was really, really important. And again, that also gained trust within the staff itself and the culture that whenever we put our minds to something and want to get it done, it can be done. If you would have asked me before, we will get 70% of our agents into home office in a matter of weeks. No, I would have not believed that.
And that's the amazing thing of crises, or these inflection points when things have to happen really, really quickly. How do you see yourself in your role as a CEO as that change catalyst that definitely can pull some of the bigger levers to make our work more fun, more effective, improve the employee experience, maybe at some point even improve pay? And the question really is, where are you right now with regards to how you define your role, not just the operational role, obviously, as you say, keep the lights on in a crisis and never waste a good crisis now moving forward. How do you see yourself as a change catalyst of Capita in Germany and in Europe?
The most important thing to find for Capita is the purpose. The purpose, why do we exist? Why is any customer paying for our services? And why does any end customer want to be engaged with us? And the answer to that is we want to create better outcome. We are all about customer experiences. The important part for me is customer experiences are at the heart of what we do, but we're not very good in it yet. And there are several reasons for that. One reason is we are often working towards in processes that are given to us by our customers, and they want it that way because they believe it's the right way. Now, we give feedback, of course, if we believe it's not the right way and we're not creating those great customer experiences, but they have sometimes very determined views on that one. And we will work towards what the customer, our paying customer, wants. and we might disappoint end customers and not deliver real great customer experiences. Now, having said that, I think my role as a catalyst and as a driver for this business is to get away from that old doctrine of just fulfilling what the customer wants, but to coming to a focus on helping our paying customers to have a much better customer journey and customer journey design for whatever they do. And I think this is the challenge, because at the end of the day, without a proper customer journey design, you will always have a piecemeal of stuff not fitting together, creating bad experiences, losing out on customer loyalty, losing out on customer sales, and so on and so forth, because people will just bounce off, be it in a digital way or in a non-digital way. So the catalyst for me is that I will align this company behind the idea of customer journey design and customer journey delivery, of course. And that's the great thing that we can do. We can do both design stuff because we have done it and we have consulting capabilities and all the tools in place in order to do that. And we can test those customer journeys and we can also deliver them. So in that sense, my only role is to make sure that we get in the classical business a much better, let's say, working towards better customer experiences in the traditional business, whereas in the new business, in the digitally infused business that I'm building, we're from scratch building those customer journeys to the best ways of working and ways of acting today. And I think this is where I'm bringing the analog, not so digital world and the digital world together, because they will all look like every part will look like a service running on a platform that we are offering for our customers as a, let's say, customer value proposition design platform where they can pick and choose whatever is necessary. So this is where I'm driving this thing.
And if we just go a little bit deeper into the whole world of automation, artificial intelligence, what is your vision there and what are you working on with regards to, at the moment we have chatbots and they work quite well. But what if we freed the chatbot from the screen, from this whole, I have to be at a computer in order to engage with a customer or, vice versa with a company? And the reason behind this thought or this question is a few years ago, I talked to somebody at MasterCard and they said, Marcus, we have to free the pin from the plastic. We have to free the technology that's in the pin from the plastic of the card. And obviously we've seen quite an abundance of innovation in the whole fintech space. Are there any equivalents in the BPO space, in the customer service space with regards to this sort of like next level automated AI-driven customer service that just almost feels like it's going to be an extension of you?
This is a horizon, but I would call that rather horizon 3 right now. I think the first horizon that we're working on, and if we're looking at the German Mittelstand, for example, not only the big corporates, but if we're looking at German Mittelstand, which I'm really interested in because I'm a guy from the Mittelstand or from the medium businesses. I think the medium businesses are at the heart of what I want to support in the future. And these medium businesses in Germany is almost irrespective in which sector you're looking at, are really lagging behind in their capability of delivering great customer journeys, especially in having a good digital enabling at hand. Now, this is where I would focus right now to say we need to enable those businesses strongly to stay on top of their business because they're losing out against almost everybody in the world if they are not catching up. And the German medium businesses are actually at the very heart of this entire country, for example. That's why I think the vision that you have is clearly something on the horizon, but I think we need to crawl before we can walk and before we can run. I think the most important things right now, from what I see in customer demand, is understanding really where the customer falls off the cliff, which is what I said about customer journey design. But it's also, of course, very simple RPA solutions. So robotic solutions where you can automate things that are stupid or even nasty to do by machines and not people have to do it. It's quicker, it's more efficient, and it's actually less errors altogether. The automation is really an important part. But I think the more important part is the support of agents today, more or less analog agents through AI. I think the complete standalone AI is not yet there. I think we need certainly a middle stage where the agents will have the access to an AI support that is different to what they have today. I mean, I'm just working in a project where there are lots of tests because now the newspapers are doing costs of call centers and asking test questions, and the agents will have to learn a shitload of detailed stuff in order just to perform properly here. But here, AI support is really, really important because you can enable the agents suddenly with stuff that they would not be able to do on their own. And with that one, you create a better customer experience at the other end. That's clear. We need to look at those kind of things very strongly. They all need to be platform-based. There's no way around this. You need to have access to a platform. You need to build your services on a platform in order for them to grow, to find out what's not working, to redo it, to use data as mining possibility, build new hypotheses on which you can then drive your next level of support. And at the end, of course, there will be only machines talking or interacting with humans, but that will be still a few years out.
So let's just sit with this for a second. I had the most abysmal customer experience with my bank, which after almost 20 years of living in the UK, I actually finally switched. The customer experience, it was so abysmal. It was so comical that at some point I said, when they kept asking me, do you want to record a complaints call? I said, I'm not even spend any more minute explaining you what you basically failed to do. And I guess I'm quite a blunt person. I can be quite critical, but the longer this process actually took, the more compassion I actually felt because I almost could see where they just couldn't do their job. And the biggest issue for me was that there was absolutely zero capability to understand that I'm three customers for them. I'm a business customer, I'm a mortgage customer, and I'm a consumer customer. And the reason to go to a big bank, at least from a consumer perspective for me, is to get a bit of sort of like a turnkey solution for your financial management. And every single time I talk to the three different parts of the businesses, they seem to know nothing about what goes on in the other two parts of the business. And that has cost me days of my life over the last few years. And ultimately, I said, I can't deal with this anymore. It's just enough is enough. And so that's just one story. And I'm sure you've seen many, and you alluded to this earlier, that you are given processes by your customers and you know that the end consumer experience is not great. And now bringing this back to the AI aspect that you talked about, what is on the first horizon or on the second time horizon? What's within 6, 12, 18 months time that will actually enable and empower the agents to at least have a full picture of who I am?
First of all, access to good data. And I think that's where it all starts, because if you look at chatbots today, most of those chatbots are nothing else but frequently asked questions, little bots. They do not have access to proper data, and hence they cannot provide any deeper service than answering a simple question. So I think that's where it all starts. And that's where we also start in our, let's say, rapid scan when we go to new customers to find out where they stand and what their digital maturity is. The one thing that we test is what is the capability of using the data? Which quality of data do we have? How is it stored? How can we mine it? How can we use that in order to understand behaviors of customers? And without that, in the individual business that they are and in the individual process that there is nothing that we can do, if that's not there, that we can do for the agent that's going to help. Because only if we understand the data in the existing context, we will be able to help the agent not only with knowledge that they have when something comes up and a question comes up. So things will be shown automatically, but it's also a question of what is the next best action that you can recommend on that basis, or what is the next best service that you can actually offer to the consumer in order to get their problem solved or experience enhanced. This is where it all starts. We call it the data observatory, and that's what we help our customers build in order to have for them also then this AI support. And that is basically understanding customer, building in behavioral sciences aspects in order to really factor in proper customer understanding and customer routing. Yeah.
And what is the feedback that you are getting from your agents? And the reason behind, or the intent behind the question is, when you read the news or any books, there's a lot of talk about AI taking away jobs. I've certainly come from an area in Germany where the steel plants and the coal mines closed. And then I did an apprenticeship in publishing. And that was one of the very, very first industries that got radically digitized. And a lot of these jobs did go away and they were not really that replaced. Yeah, what's the sentiment amongst staff?
I mean, as you can imagine, we are having all notions in there. But if there's a predominant notion, probably within the staff area, and of course also supported by works councils and other aspects of staff influencing, I think the predominant notion is not understanding and hence fear of that. This is understandable and it is normal and it will not go away. And by the way, this is not something that is special in the customer care arena. That is true for a lot of sectors, a lot of branches, a lot of different processes. This is certainly also something that we have to deal with as leaders or as managers, is with the evolution of technology, with the evolution of IT, with the evolution of AI in itself, but also biotechnology altogether. I think the challenge for the human race to not end as a useless species is something that we will all have to embrace. I believe the customer care or the customer experience industry in which I'm in, I think is probably, when it comes to humans, probably the last that will be completely in AI hand, because the amount of empathy, the amount of human interaction, the amount of interaction quality is really, really hard to do by AI. I'm more scared about other industries where the people will be made redundant in droves just because AI can do it much more efficient and can be updated at any time. Of course, elder employees will have more difficulties than younger, probably. But of course, there's also the other side of the business where a human might never take place in the first, where we would engage in processes that will not see any human being whatsoever, but they will all mingle together in one service scope for a certain customer, for a certain customer experience altogether. Yeah.
And I'd like to come back to the aspect of the employee experience that you mentioned earlier. Frederic Laloux, he's written this seminal book called Reinventing Organizations.
Yeah, I love that book.
Oh, great. Let's just dive into it. So you talked already about purpose, and that's really, really cool. Really glad to hear that one of your first big sort of like CEO interventions was to have a look at the purpose and reimagine it and redefine what it is to be Capita in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And then we just alluded a little bit into the topic of self-management, a little bit of more less top-down command and control. And the third big thing, which is inextricably linked to purpose, is that of wholeness. So you can't really be a company with a very, very strong purpose and really believe in the why if you design an employee experience that effectively is sort of like encouraging at best and enforcing at worst inauthenticity. So what's your vision and what are your plans, if you have some already, for this whole notion of wholeness at work?
With the idea of bringing in purpose and putting the why above the how and the what, I think I've set a very strong signal that a why doesn't matter to a machine, but a why does matter to humans. And to find purpose in what we do, even if it's a work that is not paid very well. And the people working in the outsourcing business, they are not stupid people. They are very intelligent people. They are just underpaid. And that's because of that, this industry and the understanding that costs have to be at an absolute minimum has strangled that entire line of business forever. And hence the cultural change that will lead into wholeness is probably one of the longest that I have to endure or I have to cover in this company, because the mistrust, the not existing love for management and all these institutions in our company is very strong. And it's completely different in the automotive industry. I've worked in a big automotive before. To build in a purpose there was so much easier and people so much more embracing that than it probably is in the business that I'm in. Nevertheless, that's where we have to go. And the wholeness here is for me that even if I'm not able, because the margins just don't allow, if I'm not able to to pay the employees as much as I would want to. What I can do is I can increase their better feeling by giving them a better net pay as opposed to gross pay. And so I'm using all methods and loopholes in order to give them more bang for the buck as a token for my commitment as a CEO of this company, that I understand that I must help them, and that part of the wholeness is not only the purpose, it's also that they are valued for what they do and that they feel engaged by that. Many people have said to me, listen, I know I'm not well paid, but if you can do a little bit there, I will be really happy. Most important for me is the team that I'm working in. And that's, again, coming back to the wholeness. So it's about purpose. It's about, of course, being paid in a proper way and valued in a proper way. But it's also being part of something that is bigger than myself. And that is always the team. And hence, for me, in terms of wholeness, I think focusing on the team, not on the team of management, but on the team that people are working in, and empowering those teams and giving them ability to thrive and have real great experiences, employee experiences here, and delivering customer experiences that they are being rewarded for by the feedback of customers. That is something that I think will contribute to wholeness a lot.
Stitching this together with something else you said that I think is really, really important. It's just the reality that we're living in. And that is that your customers basically pay your employees' salaries, and including yours. And you said like this whole industry has gone down, I guess, almost this rabbit hole or this dead end almost of just optimizing for efficiency. How do you see your role as the CEO of a sizable business? You mentioned it's Mittelstand, but it's 7,000 people. So I wouldn't want to give the listeners the impression that it's sort of like a medium-sized company. It's actually quite large by any stretch of the imagination. What role or what freedom do you actually see to influence, let's say, your customers or people outside of your organization? Are you having any conversations with people saying like, where's this all going to go?
Oh, yeah. We're having these kind of conversations, maybe not with the exact question like this, but a similar question all the time. I think optimizing for efficiency is a dead horse. I'm not against efficiency, don't get me wrong. I think efficiencies are important, but I think the modern world, and especially if I'm looking at the purpose of driving customer experiences, you do not get customer experiences with efficiency. You get it with effectiveness. You get it with, let's say, an understanding that being customer effective is the most important thing that you have to do. So optimizing for efficiency is a second step if you have optimized for effectiveness. And I think if I've unlearned something in my digital career is that you cannot build great customer experiences in a digital world, not in a digital world, or in any other world, I believe, if you're focusing on efficiency. So what you have to optimize for is effectiveness in order to get great results. And if you have done that and there's no improvement anymore or little improvement, you can also go for efficiency, of course, and you would be stupid not to do so, but you cannot sacrifice that for lack of effectiveness. If you work in a lean startup mode, for example, and you are really customer centric in everything that you do, and you walk in small steps in order to, and measure those steps, in order to create effectiveness. I think this is something that we will have to do also in the traditional world going forward, because it's the only way to create that effectiveness. And by the way, I believe only that effectiveness is going to create the customer loyalty and the sales numbers that you would want. As much as I sometimes dislike the size of Amazon, they are customer effective. Everything is done in a customer effective way, or almost everything. And that's the nature of that beast, is that they have optimized for effectiveness on the end consumer side. And yes, I want to support locals as well, but it's just like they're working effectively for me. And I think that's the secret, and we need to all embrace that.
And so if we don't optimize for efficiency, but for effectiveness and also for resilience, what would that look like at Capita?
Resilience is normative. We need to fill what resilience means. I mean, resilience against crises like Corona, resilience in your normal job, resilience over a period of time. I think if I've seen something that I see as a great opportunity, and we talked about that in length, is that changing the way of working in the customer care and the outsourcing industry, introducing at large scale and hybrid or a home office solution is optimizing for resilience. If there's one thing I think we all have understood is that in this crisis, it's not like your systems have gone down. There's not like a network has dropped. It's not like machines didn't have any energy or anything. The weakest factor in our entire value chain has been the victim, and that's the human being. You need to build in resilience for business in the sense that you are somehow protecting that vulnerable factor. That tool, the home office tool, for example, is something that is gonna save businesses.
Well, let's just stick with optimizing for effectiveness. And I'd like to come back to the employee experience and the antidote to this neoliberal shareholder value-driven capitalism, where very, very successful companies have said, look, invest in the employees first. If they have a great experience, this is quite a different mantra, because once you look after your employees, they will look after your customers, and those customers will come back with loyalty, and they will look after your shareholders. And the very sort of like real world constraints that you find yourself operating in your role in this industry. What is your dream? What are you thinking about co-creating the next and better normal out of this old normal, which very much is very cost driven, very efficiency, optimization driven. What's your personal vision for that?
With the, let's say, embracing that this world is a vulnerable world and that the capitalism as we have seen it in the last 60, 80 years is not sustainable in this world, I think is a huge paradigm shift. Now, this is a paradigm shift that will become even more difficult because it is the shareholder value, a notion that we most of all work against, will have to change in that sense. And for that point, I think it's not about giving up KPIs, for example. The KPIs are really important, but to changing understanding what are the important KPIs. In my world, I would be happy if we would go away from the short-livedness of businesses and looking at quarter results and half-year results and so build for something that is more sustainable and working towards a longer-term goal. But that is, of course, if you're driven by quarter-year results, is something that's really difficult to engage with. And I think that's what all the businesses suffer from. So my wish would be to businesses to be courageous enough to stand up and say, okay, I have a long-term vision for that and I have a long-term plan and it's going to work and it's going to be a better world when I'm finished with this. Understanding what your purpose is, understanding what the KPIs are that drive that purpose and building it for the long term and being really courageous enough to not give in if the short-term pressures come up. And I think that's where people break down. And that's where I find myself in trouble a lot, to be honest.
Wow. I mean, I'm really inspired, André. You're doing a fantastic job, I think, on this whole purpose quest in improving employee experience and just making generally lives better for people whilst keeping the lights on. So I really, really commend you for that. So where are you right now?
Plowing on with the attitude that I've built, with the convictions that I have, and with the values that live in me. There's so much more I need to do, and there's so much more courage I need to muster in order to do that, because it's so much easier to give in to stuff than it is to really overcome your own inabilities or things that you don't trust yourself. I think we all suffer from that one. So I want to build this, and I want to really get a better business in the next few years than it is today. I want this business to contribute in the landscape that we're in. And people will say, okay, I'm not only proud to work for Capita, I'm also proud to work in Capita because we're delivering on a purpose that's really, really valuable to people. That's actually all I want to do.
Where are you right now at the level of self in terms of the micro shifts that you actually notice you are already doing, going into that direction of being that CEO of a different Capita with a different purpose, with a more meaningful purpose?
The shift that I feel that I'm doing every day is to ask myself at every beginning of a day and the end of a day whether I have made a difference and whether I have been strict enough and courageous enough in order to drive a little bit this business forward. Have I done enough? Have I talked enough? Have I engaged with people enough? Have I listened enough, actively listened enough to people? And have I learned anything that I can use the very next day in order to take the next baby step. And I think I coming from a generation that is probably hugely infected with thoughts and the ideas of the last century. I have to undo my learning every day and be better, a little bit better, in order to create a little better outcome. And that's the micro change I'm doing. And I'm taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and sometimes really 3 steps back. And I'm of course like frustrated, like everybody is, if things don't work. But I think to muster again the courage in order to say, okay, I'm going to be out there in the arena. I'm going to be eating the dust, and I'm going to stand up and do that again and again until what I believe is needs to happen happens. And I think this is the micro change that I'm doing, if that makes any sense.
Shifting perspectives here. As a consumer, what is our responsibility in all of this? Because we can easily say, oh, these big companies, and they're all optimized for efficiency and all the rest of it. But, we obviously play a part in this because we could also do something or we don't. What's your view on that? And how do you experience yourself with that hat on or from that perspective?
And I give you just one example because that is really at the core in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, probably throughout the entire Corona crisis, but it's about the slaughterhouses, the animal slaughtering factories and distribution, let's say, chains that they have for cows, pigs, and what have you. They have come under huge scrutiny in Germany as Corona has uncovered all the things that are wrong in this business. Of course, what it has triggered is a discussion about can we sustain that kind of business? Can we sustain our way of denying what is happening in this line of businesses, and the pain and the suffering we're giving to animals, and of course the pain and the suffering we're giving to humans that work in those kind of industries. And that is something where I think people will now, and the consumer will have to reorientate for quality and for life and for understanding and supporting things that are good in life, as opposed to saving the last dime and eating just a pound of flesh more. I think this is something that will drive that. And I think what also people have understood is that loyalty and supporting quality and being loyal to your local, let's say, pub or restaurant or your dealer, that is something that's really important, because if you are not loyal, you're not supporting, even if it's at a higher price, the diversity will go, and the only thing that's left is a great customer experience, but let's say, retailer, which is Amazon. So I think, yes, the customer has to really do a lot of rethinking, because at the end of the day, of course, the customer is the sovereign in this world, but the customer is also influenced and formed and driven by marketing. But I think we need to start thinking for ourselves and reevaluate the values in which we live, or that are really important to us. And I think quality and quality of life for humans as well as for animals is something that, for example, is important, and that the same is true, by the way. I mean, in other industries where water is just seen as a resource that it costs nothing, and that hence you can use it in abundance and pollute it, and where flying through the air or whatever you do costs nothing, and hence you can travel for 30 euros from Berlin to Munich, or the other way around. This is also something where customers will have to understand that these prices are not possible. They're just not possible. They're fake prices, because some of the factor costs are just not put in. And these factor costs, they will pay through with a different wallet.
So you mentioned that Corona obviously has unmasked a lot of these deficiencies in our world that we have created. I mean, everything pretty much is a social construct, right? We have DNA, so we are part of nature by way of having DNA that we share with lots of other animals and even plants. And almost everything that we have created over the last 10,000 years is a construct and is a social construct. That means also we can change it, and we can change it actually very, very quickly. And in fact, at a neurological level, changing a deeply held belief, an assumption, or an unwritten rule, it actually only can happen in the here and now. So if you have that change of heart, and for instance, 2.5 years ago, within a matter of a second, I decided to become vegetarian because my son wanted to be a vegetarian and said, for different reasons, by the way, but I said, absolutely, I instantly did that. The deed, the mere choice of whether you go left or right, you choose A or B, that actually happens in the moment. And you notice that when it happens. So if Corona could speak, what are the signals? What are the words? What are the messages that it has for us? What can we learn from it? And how can we use it as an instrument for change?
Wow. There is the scene in Matrix where Morpheus is captured and interrogated by this agent program, Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith actually reveals what he thinks about humans. And Mr. Smith says that he believes that humans, in his view, are nothing else but a virus destroying the planet on which they are, because they gather in a certain area, consume all the resources, and move on. Now, I found that very interesting at the time, and when I remember it now in the Corona times, I thought, yes, that is so true. And I think if Corona could speak, it would say to me then probably stop behaving like a virus, or I show you what the results will be. I think we need to rethink our approach to life and this world, because we are the weak part in it. This world will go on without us, and we can destroy at least our species in a short period of time, but we could also do differently. And if Corona has also shown one thing to me is, if somebody says this is not possible, then I think we need to challenge that, because who would have thought that at one point in April or May, about 3 billion people were in lockdown on the planet, something like that. I mean, if you would have told me that, let's say last December, when I looked at the Chinese and how they locked down Wuhan and all the other cities there, I thought, wow, that is how they do that, impossible. It could never work here. People would never do this, and unimaginable. No, it is. It happened. Okay. And it happened big scale. I mean, it happened in India with all the side effects that has, of course, but it has happened. So nothing is impossible, but we need to understand what it does, of course, but nothing is impossible. So we can stop behaving like a virus ourselves.
Wow, I haven't seen it from that perspective. That's very thought-provoking, obviously, and that reminds me of all sorts of wisdoms that I've dabbled into in the worlds of the psychedelics, in the worlds of trauma therapy, that basically people say, or the experts rather say, everything is connected with each other. And I'm not religious, but I'm also not an atheist anymore. That really shook me when you said that. Gosh, it is the manifestation of what we are that actually is what we see in the mirror when we look at COVID-19. Bringing it back to the level of self. And as I said to you, I really, really admire you for that values-driven leadership that you show, not just with Capita, but I mean, we go back almost 20 years ago, André, and I've always seen you as a person that has a high emotional intelligence, really strong values, a really compassionate guy, actually. And obviously you have to sometimes make tough decisions, but you make those decisions, at least when I was around, in a really, really humane way. What small change have you done in the last 3-4 months with yourself that you would like to promote to others? If almost like if you had a billboard and you could tell other leaders or aspiring leaders what really matters or what you've changed, what you've noticed about yourself, what would that be?
The one thing that always comes in the way is the insecurity about things. I've always been an insecure overachiever my entire life, and it has struck me in the crisis mode that this is my biggest obstacle, and I'm working on that more heavily and more intensely as I've ever done before, because whenever something bugs me, I can trace it back to some insecurity that I feel because not being strong enough, not being hard enough, not being empathetic enough, whatever. And this is important to let go. And this is really, I mean, it's ingrained in my DNA. So it's probably, I will never get rid of it completely, but I need to work on that one, because this insecurity keeps me away from doing sometimes the right things at the right time and making tough decisions about myself or others or the business. And I think this is something that needs to go away, because the aspect of insecurity is there's nothing wrong with it. If it ends in the thinking you're not good enough for some things, then it becomes an obstacle. And I think many people that at least I have spoken to suffer from a lot of insecurities. They all do. I mean, there are very little people I know that don't. But those that have made their peace with their insecurity and have understood that that doesn't mean that they're not good enough in order to do the right things and to be courageous, they have actually moved on. And I think this is something where that probably comes back to what I said before when you asked about the small changes. This is a small change thing that needs to happen also every day. And again, this is my toughest journey. This is my toughest journey.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, that's what I mentioned earlier. It's like I have to get over myself basically every single day. And that is my ego. That are my insecurities, the stories that I'm telling myself. So I'm really, really moved. Thank you so much for sharing that and showing that vulnerability. I actually think that obviously you say this as a human being, but also you are conscious that you're saying this as somebody who has a formal role, the CEO of a company. And what I find is that is one of the biggest obstacles for companies to actually have more purpose, to do all the things that you mentioned earlier on, is when the leaders can't show vulnerability. I mean, this is one of the most hardest researched and evidenced piece, mainly driven by Brené Brown, which is a fantastic social researcher in the US, that yes, we have to be confident. We have to show a vision. We have to give people hope. Absolutely. And at the same time, we have to be vulnerable. So are there any final words from you?
If there's one thing that really is important for leaders is to be humble enough to not see yourself with greatness, because it will be in the way of being gentle and helpful to others. Because the more gentle and helpful you are with your peers or your employees or your friends, the more you will get back and the better it will be and the better the culture will thrive. Because that's what people are really longing for, that kind of gentleness and knowing that they will be helped.
Wow. I'd like to finish on that note. These are very, very wise words, and they come from a position of love. And I'll certainly be pondering on that, whether I am showing up gentle enough. André, thank you so much for this really, really enlightening conversation. It actually gives me quite a bit of hope that with having people like yourself in the role of a CEO of an organization with 7,000 people, that we are headed in a good direction and that we provide an antidote to all the mess that's going on in the world. So thank you very much for sharing that here, and catch you soon. I wish you a good time.
Thank you, Marcus. That was great. I love to do it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. You can find some useful links in the podcast notes. I have lined up some amazing guests for the next few episodes, and I would love your feedback, thoughts, and suggestions so that I can evolve this experiment based on what's needed in the business world right now. I want to make capitalism much more conscious, and for that, we need businesses to have more purpose, more people to show more leadership, and organizations to have more positive impact on stakeholders, including our blue planet, the only known habitable place in the universe. You can email me on hello@markusstruhn.com or search for Markus Struhn on LinkedIn. Please do subscribe to my podcast and share this with others. Catch you soon. Not back to normal.